History is filled with moments that make no sense. We are about to explore 25 of its greatest unsolved mysteries, events so baffling they have resisted explanation for centuries. By the end, you will possess a deeper understanding of the fragile line between what we know and what we can only wonder about. How did an entire colony of over 100 people simply vanish, leaving only a single word carved into a post? What could cause hundreds of people to dance uncontrollably until they dropped from exhaustion? These are not just stories, they are historical black holes where the past refuses to give up its secrets. What do you believe is the most compelling proof that we have not yet uncovered all of history's truths? Our first story begins not with a bang, but with a profound and chilling silence. In the year 1587, on the remote shores of what is now North Carolina, an English colony simply ceased to exist. Governor John White had sailed back to England for crucial supplies, leaving behind his daughter, his newborn granddaughter Virginia Dare, and over 100 other settlers. When he finally managed to return 3 years later, delayed by war, he found a scene of utter abandonment. The fort and cabins were dismantled, not destroyed, suggesting a planned departure. There were no signs of a struggle, no graves, and no people. The only message left was a single word carved into a wooden post, CROATOAN, and the letters CRO carved into a nearby tree. This was not a panicked scrawl, it was a deliberate sign. CROATOAN was the name of a nearby island and also the tribe of Native Americans who lived there, a group that had been generally friendly to the English. So did the colonists simply move to live with them? This is the most accepted theory, that facing starvation and isolation, they integrated with the local tribes for survival. Some later reports from other English explorers mention meeting indigenous people with grey eyes or who spoke English, or who claimed descent from white settlers. Yet, if assimilation was the answer, why did no one from the colony ever come forward to meet later English ships? Why was there no clear trail? Other theories point to a darker end, perhaps a devastating storm, a deadly epidemic, or a violent conflict with a less friendly tribe. But again, the orderly state of the settlement argues against a sudden, violent attack. The word carved into the post is the true heart of the mystery. It was a pre-arranged signal. Governor White had instructed the colonists that if they were forced to leave, they should carve the name of their destination into a tree or post. If they were in distress, they were to add a Maltese cross. There was no cross, just the word. They meant to tell him where they went. So why, when White went to CROATOAN Island, did he find no trace of them? Storms prevented a thorough search, and he had to return to England. The lost colony of Roanoke stands as a ghostly preamble to American history, a community that evaporated into the wilderness, leaving behind a name that is both a clue and a riddle. It is a story of fragile hope meeting an indifferent land, and a reminder that sometimes history's most compelling answers are the ones it deliberately withholds. From a vanished colony, we move to a book that refuses to be read. The Voynich Manuscript is not merely a historical artifact, it is a 400-year-old locked door. Carbon dating places its vellum pages firmly in the early 15th century, a product of the European Renaissance, but everything inside it belongs to a world we cannot recognize. 240 pages are filled with exquisite, bewildering illustrations. There are plants that do not match any known species on Earth, their roots and leaves twisting in impossible configurations. There are intricate astronomical charts featuring unfamiliar constellations and celestial spheres, and there are pages upon pages of nude women, often depicted bathing in or connected by elaborate networks of what appear to be green tubes or flowing pipes, a scene that looks less like a medieval bathhouse and more like a diagram of a mysterious biological system. Accompanying every image is the true heart of the mystery, text written in an elegant, flowing script using characters found in no known alphabet. This is not a language anyone has ever deciphered. The script has its own consistent structure with patterns that suggest a real language, not random gibberish. It has letters, words, and paragraphs that follow grammatical rules. Yet for 6 centuries, its meaning has remained perfectly opaque. Who could have created such a thing, and for what possible purpose? The theories are as wild as the manuscript itself. Some believe it is the work of a brilliant, perhaps unhinged, alchemist like Roger Bacon, encoding secret recipes for the philosopher's stone in a cipher meant only for the initiated. Others propose it is a sophisticated hoax, crafted to deceive a wealthy patron, though the sheer consistency and complexity of the text make a meaningless forgery from that era seem unlikely. More fanciful ideas suggest it is a record of lost knowledge from Atlantis, or even a document not of this world. The most compelling modern analysis suggests it may be written in a constructed proto-language or in a highly abbreviated form of a known language using a cipher so personal to the author that the key died with them. What is undeniable is the manuscript's power to frustrate. It has resisted every attempt at decryption, from the finest codebreakers of the Second World War to the most advanced artificial intelligence systems of the 21st century. Machines that can crack wartime ciphers in seconds meet their match in these flowing botanical pages. The Voynich Manuscript is a beautiful, maddening paradox. It is a book bursting with information, a volume clearly intended to communicate something of great importance, yet it communicates absolutely nothing we can understand. It sits in a library at Yale University, a silent testament to the idea that some secrets from the past are not just hidden, they are written in a language we have forgotten how to even see. While a manuscript holds its secrets in silence, our next mystery erupted into a frenzy of uncontrollable public noise. The streets of Strasbourg in the summer of 1518 became the stage for one of history's most terrifying and inexplicable events. It began simply, almost innocuously, when a woman named Frau Trophia stepped into a public square and began to dance. This was not a joyful performance or a celebratory jig. Witnesses described her movements as fervent, compulsive, and utterly relentless. She danced alone for days, her feet pounding the cobblestones until they bled, her body refusing to obey her will to stop. Authorities, baffled, initially decided the best cure was more dancing. They hired musicians and cleared more space, believing the dancers simply needed to exhaust the madness out of their systems. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. Within a week, dozens had joined her. Within a month, the number had swelled to over 400 people, a heaving, writhing mass of humanity caught in a paralyzing compulsion. They danced through day and night, through heat and fatigue, their faces often etched with expressions of agony and terror. The dance was a death sentence. Many collapsed from sheer exhaustion. Others suffered heart attacks or strokes. Historical records suggest that at times the death toll reached 15 people a day, their bodies finally giving out from the relentless, involuntary exertion. So what force could possibly command a human body to dance itself to death? The leading theory is a phenomenon known as mass psychogenic illness, a form of mass hysteria where physical symptoms spread through a population with no organic cause, often triggered by extreme psychological stress. The context is crucial. The years leading up to 1518 in Strasbourg were a nightmare. The region was gripped by severe famine, devastating harvest failures, and the brutal spread of syphilis and smallpox. People lived under the constant shadow of disease, starvation, and the pervasive medieval belief in divine punishment. In such a pressure cooker of despair, the mind can break in collective ways. One person's genuine psychological breakdown, perhaps Frau Trophia's, could have become a contagious template for release, a physical manifestation of the community's shared trauma. Another compelling suspect is ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that grows on damp rye, a staple grain of the poor. When ingested, it contains chemicals similar to LSD, causing powerful hallucinations, sensations of burning skin, and violent muscle spasms or convulsions. Could a batch of spoiled rye bread have caused hundreds to experience a nightmarish, convulsive dance? The timing and symptoms align, yet ergot poisoning typically causes gangrene and severe pain that would likely immobilize, not organize a month-long dance marathon. Some historians point to religious mania. The era was one of intense piety and fear. There were cults that practiced ecstatic dancing to achieve religious transcendence or to appease an angry saint like Saint Vitus, who was traditionally invoked against dancing maladies. Did a desperate populace, believing they were cursed by this saint, begin to dance as a form of penitent worship, only to find the ritual had taken on a life of its own? The dancing plague defies a single, clean answer. It sits at a horrifying intersection of biology, psychology, and belief. It is a story of a community's suffering manifesting in the most bizarrely public way imaginable, a literal dance of death that reminds us how thin the line can be between the mind's power and the body's rebellion. The dancing plague of Strasbourg was a human storm of inexplicable origin, but our next mystery arrived from the cold emptiness of space. In the early morning of June 30th, 1908, in a remote part of Siberia near the Tunguska River, the sky tore itself apart. Reindeer herders and a few scattered traders witnessed a blinding blue-white fireball streaking across the heavens, brighter than the sun. Seconds later, a cataclysm unfolded. A titanic explosion ripped through the atmosphere, flattening 80 million trees across 800 square miles of dense forest. The force of the blast was so immense it was heard over 600 miles away. Seismographs across Europe and Asia recorded the shock waves as they traveled around the globe. Barometers in England detected the atmospheric disturbance. For nights afterward, skies as far away as London glowed with strange, silvery clouds, so bright that people could read newspapers at midnight. The energy released has been estimated at 1,000 times greater than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Yet, when scientists finally reached the epicenter over a decade later, led by the determined Russian mineralogist Leonid Kulik, they found a scene of staggering devastation but no answer. The trees were scorched and knocked over in a perfect radial pattern, pointing away from a central point. But at that center, there was no crater, no impact site. No giant piece of extraterrestrial metal or rock. It was as if a colossal fist had slammed down from the sky, vaporizing itself in the process. So what could deliver such unimaginable force and leave no trace of itself? The leading scientific explanation, and the most widely accepted, is that a relatively small asteroid or a fragment of a comet, perhaps only 100 to 200 feet across, entered Earth's atmosphere at a shallow angle and tremendous speed. The intense heat and pressure of its descent caused it to explode in a massive airburst several miles above the ground. This detonation released all its kinetic energy at once, creating a blast wave that hammered the forest below without ever touching it. Think of it not as a bullet hitting the ground, but a bomb detonating in midair. This theory fits the evidence beautifully, explaining the radial tree fall and the lack of a crater. Yet, even this neat solution leaves troubling gaps. Expeditions have sifted the soil and peat for over a century, finding microscopic particles of extraterrestrial dust and tiny glassy spheres that could be melted space rock, but no definitive, sizable fragments. This absence fuels other, more speculative ideas. Could it have been a chunk of antimatter from deep space, annihilating itself in a flash of pure energy upon contact with our atmosphere? Some have even proposed a microscopic black hole passing through the Earth, an idea that strains physics to its limits. A more earthly, yet equally fascinating, theory points to the work of the brilliant inventor Nikola Tesla. In the years leading up to 1908, Tesla was experimenting with his Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island, attempting to transmit electrical power wirelessly across the globe. He claimed he could send concentrated beams of energy to any point on the planet. In a strange coincidence, Tesla reportedly asked an explorer about the remote Tunguska region just before the event, and some records suggest he was actively testing his equipment that very week. Could a misdirected burst of his revolutionary technology have caused the devastation? Most scientists dismiss this, as the scale of energy required far exceeds anything Tesla could have generated, but the eerie timing keeps the idea alive in the corners of the mystery. The Tunguska event remains the largest impact event in recorded human history, a stark warning of our planet's vulnerability. It is a cosmic whodunit where the prime suspect, a rocky visitor from the asteroid belt, seems guilty, but the conclusive evidence, the murder weapon itself, has vanished into thin air. The cosmic violence of Tunguska obliterated a forest, but our next mystery is a marvel of delicate precision pulled from the depths of the sea. In the year 1901, sponge divers working off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera stumbled upon the wreck of a Roman cargo ship. Among the shattered statues and corroded treasures, they recovered a lump of green, calcified bronze about the size of a large book. It seemed unremarkable, just another piece of ancient junk. But decades later, when it was carefully cleaned and examined, researchers saw something impossible. Peeking through the crust were intricate, interlocking bronze gears. This was not a statue or a simple tool. It was a machine. The Antikythera Mechanism, as it came to be known, has been dated to around 100 years before the Common Era. And it has one staggering purpose. It is an astronomical calculator, a device built to model the movements of the heavens. By turning a hand crank on its side, a user could advance a series of dials and pointers to predict the positions of the Sun, the Moon, and the 5 known planets. It could forecast lunar and solar eclipses decades in advance, and even accounted for the irregular orbit of the Moon. A small, rotating ball showed the phases of the Moon, while another dial tracked the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. This was not magic or guesswork. It was mechanical computation of breathtaking complexity, powered by a differential gear, a technology so advanced it would not be seen again until the 19th century. The question it forces upon us is shattering. Who in the ancient world possessed the knowledge to build such a thing? The craftsmanship and astronomical understanding point to the legendary minds of Greek science. Could it have been designed by the genius Archimedes himself, who was known to have built intricate planetariums, though none survived? Or perhaps the great astronomer Hipparchus, whose theories on the Moon's motion are directly encoded in the gear trains? The shipwreck dates to roughly 70 years after Archimedes' death, but it is entirely possible the mechanism was a prized copy of one of his designs being shipped as loot to Rome. The true horror of the Antikythera Mechanism is not its existence but its isolation. It proves that a level of technological and scientific thought existed in the ancient world that we never imagined. This was not a one-off experiment. The engineering is too refined, too elegant. It suggests a tradition, a school of thought, a lineage of craftsmanship that has been completely erased from the historical record. How could knowledge this profound simply vanish for over 1,500 years? The fall of the classical world offers grim answers. The great library of Alexandria, a repository of such knowledge, was destroyed. The Roman Empire fractured, and the meticulous mechanical arts of Greek science were no longer prioritized or preserved. Practical engineering for war and construction survived, but the exquisite clockwork philosophy of modeling the cosmos was lost, perhaps considered a mere curiosity for the wealthy. For centuries, the medieval world believed the cosmos was governed by celestial spheres and divine will, not by gears and mathematics that could be held in your hand. The Antikythera Mechanism rewrites the timeline of human ingenuity. It tells us that the seeds of our scientific revolution were planted far earlier than we thought, only to lie dormant in the dark earth of a forgotten shipwreck. It is a ghost from a road not taken, a whisper of an ancient future that never was. The silent gears of the Antikythera Mechanism speak of knowledge lost, but our next story is a roar swallowed by the desert. In the year 524 before the Common Era, according to the Greek historian Herodotus, the Persian emperor Cambyses II committed an act of staggering hubris. Having conquered Egypt, he grew enraged when the priests of the Oracle of Ammon at the remote Siwa oasis refused to legitimize his rule. In his fury, he dispatched a massive army, 50,000 strong, from the city of Thebes with a single, blasphemous order: march across hundreds of miles of the Libyan desert and destroy the sacred oracle. Herodotus tells us the army made good progress for 7 days, reaching a place called the Oasis of the Blessed. Then they marched out into the dunes and vanished forever. The historian reports that a monstrous, screaming sandstorm rose from the south, a wind so fierce and laden with sand that it buried the entire army, every man, every horse, every piece of equipment, in a single, catastrophic instant. It is a story of divine punishment written on a continental scale, a force of nature erasing a force of man without a trace. But is it history or a convenient myth crafted to explain a military disaster? Cambyses II was a ruler whose campaign ended in failure and mystery. He died not long after under unclear circumstances, and his reputation suffered. The story of the lost army served his critics perfectly, painting him as a mad tyrant whose arrogance literally provoked the earth to swallow his forces. For centuries, the tale was considered a dramatic parable, yet the haunting question remained: could an army of 50,000 truly disappear? The sheer scale of the logistics makes the story compelling. An army that size was a moving city, requiring vast amounts of water, food, and animals. Its disappearance would have been a seismic event in the ancient world, a shockwave of rumor and fear. So did Herodotus, often called the father of history but also the father of lies, stumble upon a kernel of truth. Modern expeditions have ventured into the brutal deserts of Western Egypt, driven by this very question. In the 1990s, a team led by archaeologists searching for Cambyses' army claimed a monumental discovery. In a vast, remote area near the Siwa oasis, they reported finding artifacts that seemed to date to the Persian era: bronze weapons, fragments of metal, and perhaps most chillingly, human bones. The initial reports sparked global excitement, suggesting the legend was real. However, the story quickly unraveled under scrutiny. Other scholars and archaeologists pointed out that the artifacts were scattered and not found in a concentration that would suggest an army's final resting place. The bones were few, not the thousands one would expect. The bronze daggers could have come from later nomadic tribes or even from a much smaller, lost caravan. No definitive evidence, like Persian royal seals or concentrated weapon caches, has ever been confirmed. The desert is a master of both preservation and deception. It can hide a city for millennia, yet it can also scatter and disguise objects across centuries, creating tantalizing but false patterns. So where does that leave the lost army? The most likely explanation is a tragic blend of fact and folklore. It is entirely probable that Cambyses did send a force to subdue Siwa, a strategic oasis. That force, attempting a suicidal march across one of the most unforgiving deserts on Earth, likely met a grim end. They would have succumbed not to a single, cinematic sandstorm, but to the slow, grinding horror of thirst, starvation, disorientation, and hostile tribes. A scattered, dying remnant of an army, lost and buried by shifting dunes over time, could easily transform in the telling over generations into the legend of a divine sandstorm swallowing 50,000 men whole. The story persists because it touches a primal fear, the fear of being erased. The desert did not need a miracle to destroy an army. It had patience, heat, and an endless supply of sand. The lost army of Cambyses stands as a powerful metaphor for history itself, where a catastrophic truth can be buried, only to resurface centuries later as a ghost story written in dust and bone. The desert's silence is absolute, but the ocean holds a different kind of emptiness, one that moves and whispers. In December 1872, a British merchant ship named the Dei Gratia spotted another vessel adrift in the calm Atlantic, midway between the Azores and Portugal. As they drew closer, they recognized her, the American brigantine Mary Celeste. They signaled her, but no one replied. A boarding party rowed over to investigate, and what they found, or more accurately what they did not find, would become the cornerstone of maritime lore. The ship was perfectly seaworthy, her sails partly set, her hull sound. Below decks, the cargo of industrial alcohol was largely intact. In the captain's quarters, the personal belongings of Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter, and the crew of 7 were all undisturbed. A chart was open on the table. In the galley, provisions were plentiful. Most haunting of all, the crew's breakfast dishes had been washed and put away, and in the mess a table was set for a meal, waiting for diners who would never arrive. The only things missing were the ship's chronometer, the navigation sextant, the ship's papers, and of course, every single human being. The lifeboat was gone, suggesting an orderly, if frantic, abandonment. But why? There was no sign of violence, no struggle, no water in the bilge beyond a normal amount. The last log entry was from 10 days prior, and it noted nothing amiss, only a position about 400 miles from where she was found. The ship had been sailing herself, a ghost with a crew of ghosts. The immediate theories were practical, if unsatisfying. Piracy was considered, but pirates would have taken the valuable cargo and the crew's personal effects. Mutiny made little sense, as Captain Briggs was known as a fair and competent man, and his family was aboard. Perhaps a waterspout, a tornado over water, had terrified them into believing the ship was sinking, causing a panicked evacuation into the lifeboat, only for the Mary Celeste to ride out the storm. Maybe a leaky barrel of alcohol fumes caused a fear of explosion, prompting a temporary evacuation that turned tragic when the tow line to the lifeboat snapped. Even a giant squid attack was proposed, a monstrous cephalopod rising from the depths to pluck people from the deck, though it left no marks. The more outlandish ideas ventured into the supernatural, tales of sea monsters, alien abduction, or a rupture in the fabric of reality. The truth is likely mundane and terrifying in its simplicity. The ocean is a capricious place, and the judgment of even seasoned sailors can fracture under sudden perceived threat. The most plausible explanation is a combination of factors. The ship was carrying over 1,700 barrels of denatured alcohol. The vapors from even one leaking barrel could have built up, and perhaps the captain, smelling the fumes and fearing a catastrophic explosion, gave the order to abandon ship with the intention of staying tethered at a safe distance until the danger passed. In the open Atlantic, a snapped line or a sudden squall could have swiftly spelled doom for an overloaded lifeboat, while the mother ship, venting its fumes, sailed on unharmed. The missing navigational instruments suggest the captain, anticipating a return, took them to keep the lifeboat on course. It is a story not of monsters, but of a single, catastrophic mistake. The Mary Celeste endures because it is a perfect blank canvas. Every detail we have raises 2 more questions. The set table implies normalcy moments before chaos. The missing lifeboat implies a plan, but the absolute absence of any final message, any clue to their reasoning, leaves us staring at the same emptiness those sailors from the Dei Gratia faced. It is the quintessential ghost ship story because the ship itself refused to die, sailing on without its soul, a perpetual monument to a decision made in fear that vanished into the sea's endless blue. While the Mary Celeste vanished into the blue horizon, another mystery emerged from the green earth of the English countryside. In the 12th century, in the village of Woolpit in Suffolk, reapers working the fields made a startling discovery. Near one of the wolf hunting pits that gave the village its name, they found 2 children, a boy and a girl, trembling and alone. Their clothing was strange, of an unfamiliar material and cut. But it was their skin that caused true disbelief, for it was tinged a profound, unsettling shade of green. They spoke in a language no one could understand, and when offered food, they refused everything except raw beans, which they ate straight from the stalks. The villagers took them in, and over time the children adapted. As they learned to eat normal food, their green coloration slowly faded. They also learned English, and when they could finally communicate, they told a story that has echoed through the centuries. They claimed to come from a place they called St. Martin's Land, a twilight realm where the sun never shone, and all light was perpetual, muted green like the glow just after sunset. They said they had been tending their father's flocks when they heard a loud sound like bells and suddenly found themselves in the woolpit field, disoriented and terrified. The boy, who was younger, grew sickly and died not long after. The girl, however, thrived, eventually lost her green hue completely, and was employed as a servant in a local household. She later married a man from King's Lynn and was said to have lived a normal, if notably remembered, life. So what do we make of this account recorded by two separate medieval chroniclers? The most grounded theory points to a historical tragedy. In the 12th century, Flemish immigrants had settled in eastern England but faced persecution. King Henry II forced many to flee, and some may have hidden in the dense forests and underground chalk mines of the region. The children could have been orphaned Flemish refugees, malnourished and sick, emerging from a dark forest or a mine shaft. Their green skin could be explained by chloroses, a form of anemia from a poor diet that can give the skin a greenish pallor. Their strange language would simply be Flemish. The beans they ate, likely fava beans, are high in iron, which could have helped treat their condition, explaining their initial craving. The perpetual twilight of St. Martin's Land could be a child's memory of the dark, enclosed forest or mine they came from. Yet other interpretations are more tantalizing. Could this be a folk memory of earlier indigenous inhabitants of Britain, a people displaced by the Anglo-Saxons living in hidden, earth-based communities? Some see it as a parable of the wild folk, the fairies or elves of folklore, who are often said to live in hollow hills and whose children were sometimes left in the human world. The green color is deeply tied to fairy lore, representing otherworldliness and a connection to the untamed earth. The sound of bells they heard could be interpreted as fairy music, the very thing said to lure humans into their realm. The story occupies a fascinating borderland between history and myth. It is specific enough with names and locations to feel real, yet its core details are utterly fantastical. Perhaps its greatest power is as a metaphor for profound cultural dislocation. Two children utterly lost from a world that makes no sense to those who find them. Their green skin marks them as outsiders in the most visceral way possible, a physical manifestation of their difference that only fades as they are assimilated, as they learn the language and eat the food of a new world. They are refugees from an unknown country, whether that country is Flanders, a forgotten tribe, or something far stranger. The green children of Woolpit remind us that the past is not just a record of kings and battles, but of odd, intimate moments where the ordinary world cracks open, and for a brief moment something impossible walks among the wheat. The green children emerged from a hidden world, but some mysteries are not seen, they are only heard. In the quiet, high desert air of Taos, New Mexico, a sound began to haunt a small portion of the population in the early 1990s. It was not a loud noise, not a crash or a bang, but something far more insidious, a low-frequency hum, like a distant diesel engine idling just over the horizon. For those who could hear it, it was a constant, maddening presence. It vibrated through walls, followed them from room to room, and became most noticeable in the dead of night when the world was still. It was a private torment because often no one else in the same house could hear a thing. This was the Taos hum, and it turned a peaceful artistic community into a living laboratory for an unsolved sensory phenomenon. Those who reported it were not fringe characters, they were engineers, doctors, teachers, people with credible, observant lives. They described the same thing, a persistent, low-pitched rumble between 30 and 80 hertz, right at the threshold of human hearing, more felt in the bones than heard by the ears. It drove some to distraction, causing sleeplessness, headaches, and a deep psychological frustration. The local authorities, sympathetic but baffled, eventually asked for help from the most logical source, Congress. In 1993, a team of researchers from a handful of prestigious national laboratories descended on Taos. They came with sensitive acoustic equipment, seismic monitors, and a mandate to find the source. They tested for everything: underground geological activity, secret military communications, industrial machinery, even unusual power grid frequencies. They left empty-handed. Their official report concluded that while the perception of the hum was very real to those who experienced it, no physical source could be identified. The sound, it seemed, existed only in the ears and minds of the hearers. This finding, however, did not solve the mystery, it deepened it. If the hum wasn't an external sound, what was it? One leading theory points to a condition called low-frequency tinnitus. Tinnitus is commonly known as a ringing in the ears, but it can manifest as a hum, a buzz, or a roar, generated by the auditory system itself, often due to damage or stress. Perhaps a unique combination of the region's altitude, dryness, and silence made some residents hyper-aware of this internal noise, a sound their brains had previously learned to ignore. Another possibility is the phenomenon of spontaneous autocaustic emissions, where a healthy inner ear can actually produce its own faint sounds like a tiny internal speaker. For most people, these are inaudible, but for a few, they might cross the threshold into perception. Yet, the hum's specificity is troubling. Why would so many people in one geographic area suddenly develop the same type of internal sound, describing it in nearly identical terms? This points to the other major category of explanation: an external source so subtle or unusual that our instruments are missing it. Some researchers have speculated about infrasound, sound waves with frequencies below 20 Hz, which are inaudible to humans but can cause feelings of unease, anxiety, and even the sensation of pressure or vibration. Sources of infrasound include ocean waves, wind patterns over mountains, or even large industrial fans miles away. Could the unique topography of the Taos Plateau be channeling such a frequency, creating a standing wave that only a sensitive few can consciously perceive? The Taos hum is not alone. Similar persistent, low-frequency noises have been reported in dozens of places worldwide, from Bristol in England to Largs in Scotland and Windsor in Ontario. Each locale has its own hum with its own devoted and distressed hearers. This global pattern suggests the phenomenon is real, not merely a local legend or mass hysteria. But it also suggests the cause may not be singular. It might be a confluence of factors, a perfect storm of a specific, faint external stimulus, like infrasound from a distant factory, meeting a particular biological susceptibility in certain individuals. The true mystery of the Taos hum is its invisibility. It is a ghost in the machine of perception, a sound that exists in the liminal space between the world and the mind. For those who hear it, it is as real as the desert sun, a private frequency of unexplained origin, a reminder that even in our modern, instrument-laden world, some experiences resist measurement and simply have to be endured. The unsettling hum of Taos is a private frequency, but our next mystery left its mark for an entire community to see, stamped directly into the fresh snow of a Victorian winter. On the morning of February 9, 1855, across the counties of Devon and Dorset in southern England, people awoke to a scene that defied all logic. A light snowfall had dusted the landscape the night before, and in that pristine white canvas a trail of footprints had appeared, but these were no ordinary tracks. They stretched in a near-perfect single-file line for over 100 miles from the Ixie estuary to the town of Totnes, and reports suggest they even crossed the wide mouth of the river itself. The prints themselves were the stuff of nightmare, each one clearly shaped like a cloven hoof, roughly 4 inches long and 2.5 inches across, set about 8 inches apart. They marched with an impossible mechanical precision across fields and roads, through gardens and up to the walls of houses, and then, without breaking stride, the prints went directly over those walls. They were found on the tops of haystacks, traversed the steep, pitched roofs of cottages, and even appeared to go straight through solid stone walls or narrow drain pipes, as if the creature that made them was utterly unimpeded by the physical world. The effect was one of chilling, purposeful traversal. Whatever made these prints had moved in a relentless, straight line, stepping over every obstacle in its path. Panic spread like wildfire through the pious, rural communities. The immediate and overwhelming conclusion for many was that the devil himself had gone for a walk. Newspapers of the day seized on the story, calling them the devil's footprints. The Victorian mind, steeped in a blend of rigid science and fervent religiosity, was perfectly primed for such a supernatural interpretation. It was an era of spiritual unease, with Charles Darwin's revolutionary work on evolution soon to be published, challenging the very order of creation. The footprints felt like a sinister omen, a physical manifestation of a lurking, diabolical presence. Of course, more rational explanations were desperately sought. Some suggested an escaped kangaroo from a private menagerie, though its hopping gait would not create a single file line, and it certainly could not scale walls. Others proposed a large bird like a heron, though its tracks would show drag marks from its toes and could not explain the cloven shape. A more inventive theory involved an experimental balloon trailing a broken shackle or rope that punched marks into the snow as it drifted, an idea that struggles to account for the consistent spacing and the tracks going up vertical surfaces. Scientists have since proposed natural, if rare, phenomena. One leading candidate is the hopping mouse or wood mouse. During periods of thaw and refreeze, a mouse leaping through soft snow can leave a series of small, deep holes. A subsequent light snowfall can partially melt and reshape these holes, causing them to enlarge and take on a more defined, hoof-like appearance as the sun rises. The single file line is simply the mouse's natural hopping path. The tracks appearing on roofs could be explained by mice traveling along roof thatches or stone walls, with snow falling from above into their prints, creating the illusion the prints originated there. Another possibility involves atmospheric conditions. A peculiar type of localized, rotating whirlwind or dust devil carrying debris could theoretically create a series of indentations in a straight line, though the consistency and shape of the prints make this a difficult sell. The most compelling part of the mystery is not the what but the why it endures. The event was fleeting, melted away by the afternoon sun, leaving only eyewitness accounts and sketches. No photograph exists. This ephemeral quality is key. It became a story told over hearths, reported in increasingly dramatic newspaper articles, and woven into local legend. The devil's footprints represent a collision between the known world and the inexplicable. In an age just on the cusp of global communication and forensic science, here was a puzzle that could not be solved with the tools at hand. It forced a confrontation with the limits of understanding. Was it a bizarre but natural animal trail distorted by weather and fear? Or was it something else, a momentary tear in the fabric of the ordinary, leaving a trail of questions frozen in the winter snow? The prints are gone, but their impression on our imagination remains, a reminder that sometimes the most haunting mysteries are not those that endure for centuries, but those that appear one quiet night and vanish by morning, leaving only a trail of doubt behind. While the devil's footprints vanished with the snow, another artifact from the ancient world offers a tangible yet equally puzzling piece of evidence. In the basement of the National Museum of Iraq in Baghdad sits a small, unassuming clay pot about the size of a man's fist. It was excavated in the 1930s from a site near the city, and it dates from the Parthian or Sasanian period, somewhere between 250 years before the Common Era and 650 years after. At first glance, it appears to be a simple storage jar, but its contents tell a different story. Inside the clay vessel, archaeologists found a rolled copper cylinder sealed at the bottom with asphalt. Through the center of this cylinder ran an iron rod, also held in place by an asphalt plug at the top, which insulated it from the copper. This specific arrangement of materials is what sparked a revolution in historical thinking. In the 1940s, a German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig examined the object and proposed a startling theory. He suggested that if this jar were filled with an acidic liquid like vinegar or fermented grape juice, it would function as a basic electrochemical cell. The acidic fluid would act as an electrolyte, allowing a chemical reaction between the dissimilar metals, the iron and the copper, generating a small electric potential between them. In essence, he claimed it was an ancient battery. To test the idea, modern researchers have built numerous accurate replicas. When filled with an electrolyte like vinegar, these replicas do indeed produce a low voltage, typically between 0.8 and 2 volts, enough to create a faint but measurable electric current. This discovery immediately begs an electrifying question. If this was a battery, what on earth did the ancients use it for? The most popular and compelling hypothesis is electroplating. This is the process of using electricity to coat a base metal, like silver or copper, with a thin layer of a more precious metal, like gold. Artifacts from the same period and region show examples of fine gold plating that seem too thin and even to have been achieved by the traditional method of mercury gilding. Could a bank of these Baghdad batteries, linked together to increase the voltage, have been used by skilled artisans to electroplate small objects like jewelry or religious statues? Experiments have shown it is possible. A few dozen of these cells connected in series could produce enough power to facilitate a very slow, delicate plating process. It is a tantalizing image, ancient craftsmen in a Mesopotamian workshop using primitive electricity to gild sacred objects. However, not all scholars are convinced. The skeptical viewpoint argues that the artifact's purpose was far more mundane. They propose it was simply a secure storage container for valuable papyrus or parchment scrolls. The iron rod would have held the scroll, the copper cylinder would have protected it, and the asphalt seals would have kept out moisture and pests. The fact that it can produce electricity, they argue, is a coincidence of its materials, not proof of its intended function. They point out that no wires, electrodes, or other apparatus associated with electrical use have ever been found alongside these jars. Furthermore, no contemporary texts from the Parthian or Sasanian empires make any mention of electrical phenomena or such devices. If this knowledge existed, why is it completely absent from the historical record? The debate remains at a stalemate. One side sees a brilliant, practical application of observed chemical principles, a secret technique of artisan guilds that was never written down. The other sees an elaborate interpretation imposed on a simple jar. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the Baghdad battery is not whether it definitively was a battery, but what its existence forces us to consider. It demonstrates that the ancient world possessed all the raw components for a fundamental discovery: the chemistry, the metals, the observation. It sits on the razor's edge between a revolutionary technology and a common household item. Whether it represents lost knowledge or a modern misunderstanding, it charges our imagination with the possibility that a flicker of electric light may have briefly illuminated a dark room centuries before we thought possible. From the quiet hum of a possible ancient battery, we shift to the thunderous, organized silence of a vanished army. The disappearance of Rome's 9th Legion is not a ghost story from the fringes of empire, but a central mystery from the very heart of its military machine. This was Legio Nona Hispana, the 9th Spanish Legion, a veteran unit that had fought for centuries, standing with Julius Caesar in Gaul and enduring the bloody catastrophe of the Teutoburg Forest. Its battle honors were etched into the history of Rome itself. Then, around the year 108 of the Common Era, after being stationed in the damp northern fortress of Eboracum, modern-day York, to quell uprisings in Britannia, it simply ceases to appear in any official records. An entire legion, over 5,000 highly trained men, along with their cavalry, engineers, and camp followers, evaporated from history. The romantic and most enduring theory is one of epic annihilation. The legion, the story goes, was ordered north into the wild, unconquered lands of Caledonia, what we now call Scotland, to crush rebellious tribes like the Picts. They marched into the swirling mists and treacherous glens and were never seen again. The entire force was wiped out in a meticulously planned ambush or a series of brutal, running battles, their eagle standards captured, their bodies left to the crows. This narrative of a glorious, tragic end in the fog has immense power, fueling countless novels and films. It paints a picture of Rome's limit, a point on the map where even its most formidable legions could be swallowed by a hostile land and a fierce people. The problem is a striking lack of evidence. No Roman historian of the time records such a catastrophic loss in Britain. Tacitus, our prime source for early Roman Britain, is silent on the matter. No mass grave of Roman legionaries has ever been found in Scotland that dates to this period. For an empire that meticulously documented its military setbacks, the complete annihilation of one of its 28 legions would have been a seismic event, yet the historical record registers barely a tremor. This absence points to a far more bureaucratic but equally plausible fate. The Roman military was a fluid, reorganizing entity. Legions were routinely transferred from one troubled frontier to another. The 9th, already battered from previous campaigns, could have been quietly pulled from Britain and sent to reinforce other crisis points, perhaps along the Rhine frontier in Germania or to the bloody wars in the east against the Parthian Empire. There is a single, tantalizing piece of evidence that supports this. A fragmentary inscription found in Nijmegen in the modern Netherlands lists the 9th Legion. This could place it on the continent after its supposed disappearance in Britain. If it was transferred, its eventual end may have been less dramatic, perhaps disbanded due to heavy losses or merged with another unit after a defeat elsewhere, its identity erased in a military rebranding. The legion's name, Hispana, could have been retired out of respect or shame, its surviving soldiers folded into other formations. This theory is less cinematic but deeply logical. The silence in British records would then simply mean the legion wasn't in Britain anymore to be recorded. So why does the legend of its destruction in Scotland persist so strongly? Archaeology offers a chilling clue. At the fortress in York, archaeologists have found evidence of violent destruction and fire in the early 2nd century, precisely when the 9th was stationed there. This suggests the legion or its base did not go quietly. Perhaps it suffered a devastating, surprise attack right at its home fort, a blow so severe it effectively broke the unit. The survivors, too few to reconstitute the legion, may have been transferred out, while the name 9th was retired to avoid the disgrace of such a humiliating defeat so deep within Roman territory. The mystery endures because it lives in the gap between two compelling stories. One is of a dramatic, heroic last stand at the edge of the known world. The other is of a slow, administrative death by ledger and transfer order. The lost 9th Legion is a historical black hole because both explanations are satisfying in their own way, and the scant evidence allows our imagination to fill the void with either ghosts in the Scottish mist or ghosts in the imperial paperwork. A different kind of silence, one filled with the hiss of interstellar static, sets the stage for our next event. On a quiet August night in 1977, an astronomer named Jerry Amon was performing a tedious but vital task. He was reviewing a long, continuous printout of data from Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope, a massive instrument passively listening to the cosmos. The data was typically a monotonous stream of letters and numbers representing the faint radio whispers of space. Then his eye caught something impossible. On the printout, a sequence of characters leaped off the page, a sudden, intense spike in the signal strength. The telescope's system used the letters of the alphabet to denote power levels, and there, for exactly 72 seconds, the reading hit the equivalent of 30 times the normal background noise of deep space. It was a narrowband signal concentrated on one specific frequency, just what scientists predicted an artificial, intelligent transmission would look like. Stunned, Eamon circled the alphanumeric sequence on the paper and, in the margin, simply wrote the word that would give the phenomenon its name: wow. The signal appeared to originate from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, near a star group called Chi Sagittarii. It had all the hallmarks of a deliberate broadcast. It was powerful, it was focused, and it came from a point in the sky devoid of any known human-made satellites or obvious natural radio sources at that specific frequency. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, known as SETI, had its first and only credible candidate, yet as quickly as it arrived, it vanished. Despite dozens of dedicated searches with increasingly sensitive equipment over the following decades, the WOW signal has never been heard again. It was a one-time shout into the cosmic dark, leaving behind only a circled annotation on a faded computer printout. The mystery lies in its perfect, frustrating profile. If it was a message, why was it so brief? If it was a natural event, what could possibly produce such a clean, artificial-seeming burst? The hunt for an explanation has followed two distinct paths. The first and most thrilling is the possibility of an extraterrestrial origin. The signal's frequency, 1,420 MHz, is significant. It falls within a protected band of the radio spectrum known as the hydrogen line, a frequency that radio astronomers avoid using specifically because it is considered a universal channel for cosmic communication. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, and any civilization with a basic understanding of astronomy would know to listen or broadcast there. The 72-second duration also fits perfectly with the Big Ear telescope's operation, as its fixed design would have kept a signal from a single point in space in its field of view for exactly that long. It was, in essence, a perfect hit. The alternative explanations strive to be more mundane. Could it have been a reflection of a human transmission, perhaps from a secret military satellite or a piece of space debris bouncing our own signals back to us? The problem is that no known human technology at the time operated on that exact protected frequency without being immediately identifiable. Others have proposed a natural but exotic cause, like a comet. Decades later, one astronomer suggested that two comets, which were not catalogued at the time, happened to be passing through that precise region of space and could have emitted a powerful radio burst from their hydrogen clouds. However, this theory has been largely dismissed by the broader scientific community, as comets are not known to produce such intense narrowband signals. The most likely natural culprit is some form of astrophysical event we simply do not yet understand, a stellar flare or a microlensing event that focused a distant star's radio emissions for a brief moment directly at Earth. The enduring power of the WOW signal is not in its proof, but in its profound maybe. For 1 minute and 12 seconds, the universe seemed to speak directly to us in a language we were built to understand. It turned a philosophical question into a tangible, data-driven mystery. Jerry Eamon's handwritten exclamation captures the raw human reaction to that possibility, a mix of shock, hope, and wonder. In the decades since, our telescopes have grown more powerful, our searches more comprehensive, yet the silence has only deepened. The WOW signal stands alone, a cosmic anomaly that refuses to be explained away, a single, brilliant question mark written in the static between the stars. The wow signal was a fleeting question from the cosmos, but here on Earth, some questions are carved directly into the landscape, silent and immovable for millennia. On the windswept coast of Brittany in northwestern France, a forest of granite stands guard. This is the Carnac alignments, a staggering array of over 3,000 prehistoric standing stones arranged in long, precise rows that stretch for nearly 3 miles across the countryside. Erected by Neolithic people beginning around 4,500 years before the Common Era, these stones are older than the pyramids of Egypt, older than Stonehenge. They are monuments of a scale that defies easy comprehension, and their purpose has been utterly erased by time. To walk among them is to walk through a giant's abandoned game board where every piece is a mute 5-ton question mark. Unlike the circular, communal layout of Stonehenge, the Carnac stones are all about linear order and staggering repetition. The main site is divided into 3 major groupings with evocative names like Lamanic, Kermario, and Kerleskan. Each grouping consists of dozens of parallel lines like vast stone avenues with the tallest stones, some reaching over 4 meters high, positioned at the western ends. The rows gradually decrease in height as they march eastward, creating a powerful sense of direction and procession. This isn't a haphazard collection of boulders. The alignment is deliberate, the spacing considered. These people moved mountains of stone not to enclose a space but to create pathways, but pathways to where and for what? The most enduring theory is an astronomical one. Given the Neolithic people's known fascination with the sun and moon, could these rows be a colossal calendar or observatory? Some researchers have proposed that specific alignments point to the rising or setting sun at the solstices or equinoxes. Others suggest the stones acted as a sophisticated seismic detector, their placement sensitive to vibrations from the Earth, warning of distant earthquakes. Yet another idea posits they formed a sacred boundary, a liminal space separating the realm of the living from the realm of the dead or the gods, with rituals processions walking the stone avenues during ceremonies. Perhaps the most haunting interpretation is that they represent a deity or an army frozen in stone. Local legend inevitably offers a more colorful explanation. It says the stones are a Roman legion turned to stone by the wizard Merlin, caught in their ranks as they pursued him across the Breton countryside. While a charming story, it highlights the human need to impose narrative on this silent geometry. The truth likely lies in a purpose so fundamental to that culture that it needed no written explanation, a purpose woven into their very worldview. It could have been a gigantic monument to their ancestors, with each stone representing a lineage. It might have been a physical map of the cosmos, connecting their earthly home to the cycles of the heavens. Or it could have been a site for seasonal gatherings, trade, and rites of passage, with the processional rows guiding thousands of participants in rituals we can no longer even imagine. The Carnac stones present a different kind of mystery than a single vanished event. This is a sustained, communal effort spanning generations, a project that required immense social organization, shared belief, and backbreaking labor. Its scale suggests a society with a powerful, unifying vision, one compelling enough to command centuries of dedication, yet that vision left no manual. We see the breathtaking physical result, but the intention, the ceremony, the meaning behind each chosen stone has evaporated like the morning mist that often shrouds these fields. They stand as a testament not to a mystery of disappearance, but to the profound distance between human action and human understanding across the abyss of time. We can measure their height, map their rows, and carbon date the soil at their bases, but the song that was sung as they were raised is lost forever, leaving only the echo in the arrangement of the stones themselves. The silent stones of Carnac were placed with intention, but the disappearance from a Scottish lighthouse was marked by the chilling absence of any intent at all. In December 1900, a routine relief ship, the Hesperus, approached the Flattened Isles, a cluster of jagged rocks 20 miles west of the Scottish mainland. Its crew was there to deliver supplies and rotate the three lighthouse keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Jucat, and Donald MacArthur, who manned the isolated station. As they drew near, they noticed something deeply wrong. No flag was flying to welcome them. No keepers appeared on the landing platform. The main gate and the outer door to the lighthouse were both locked from the inside. When they finally forced entry, they found a scene of perfect operational desolation. The light itself was clean, filled with oil, and ready to be lit. The clocks were wound, but the men were gone, vanished from a rock in the middle of the sea. The investigation that followed pieced together a timeline from the lighthouse logbook, and it only deepened the unease. The last normal entry was from noon on December 15th. Then, a series of increasingly frantic entries, all in Assistant Keeper Marshall's hand, described a horrific storm on the days of the 16th and 17th, with winds that shook the tower to its foundations. The final line read, "Storm ended, sea calm. God is over all," but the official weather logs from the mainland showed no major storms in the area on those dates. The sea had been relatively calm. Inside the living quarters, clues pointed to a sudden, violent interruption. An overturned chair lay on the floor. Two sets of oilskins, the heavy waterproof gear, were missing, but one set remained on its peg. The kitchen clock had stopped, and the west landing, a precarious platform used for receiving supplies, showed signs of massive damage, with iron railings bent and ripped from their concrete foundations, and a storage box 100 feet above sea level swept completely clean. The official board of inquiry settled on a tragic, practical theory. They concluded that two of the keepers, perhaps Marshall and Jucat, had gone down to the west landing during a smaller, localized squall to secure equipment before the predicted winter gales. A freak wave, one of the monstrous, rogue waves the North Atlantic is infamous for, had surged up the cliff face and swept them away. The third keeper, MacArthur, seeing the disaster, had rushed out without his oilskins in a desperate rescue attempt and was taken by a second wave. It is a clean, scientific explanation that fits the damaged landing, yet the inconsistencies are like pebbles in a shoe, small but impossible to ignore. Why would experienced keepers, men who knew the sea's treachery, both go down to a dangerous landing in poor weather, leaving the lighthouse untended? Why was the chair overturned inside, suggesting a rush or a struggle within the secure tower itself? And most hauntingly, why did the logbook describe a storm that never officially happened? Could Marshall have been recording a private, psychological storm, a breakdown or a conflict among the men that culminated in violence? This theory suggests a fight, perhaps a murder, followed by a panicked cover-up and a suicidal leap into the sea by the last man standing. The supernatural explanation, fueled by local folklore that said the islands were haunted by malevolent spirits, whispers of abduction by otherworldly forces, leaving behind only the machinery of man. The truth is likely simpler and more terrifying than any ghost story. The Flattened Isles are a lonely, brutal place. The psychological strain of such isolation, combined with the constant, deafening roar of wind and sea, could warp perception. The men may have genuinely believed a storm was raging. A single, unexpected wave, a wall of water, as one investigator called it, needs no conspiracy to explain its lethal power. The overturned chair could have been knocked over in the rush to the door. The story endures because it is a perfect locked room mystery set against an immense, indifferent ocean. It reduces human life to a series of small, unanswered questions in a ledger. We are left with the image of a light that never failed, dutifully maintained by hands that were no longer there, a beacon that continued to warn others of danger even as its keepers were swallowed by the very thing they guarded against. The silent stones and empty lighthouse speak of vanished people, but what if a mystery was deliberately left behind, inscribed not to be lost but to be found? In the dry caves of Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, shepherds and archaeologists unearthed texts of profound spiritual significance, fragile parchment and papyrus holding the earliest known copies of biblical books. But in one cave, number 3, they found something that did not belong. It was 2 oxidized rolls of copper, so brittle they could not be unrolled without destroying them. For years, this metallic scroll sat as a puzzle box until scientists carefully cut it into strips. Inside, they found not psalms or prophecies, but an inventory. The copper scroll, written in a later form of Hebrew, lists over 60 locations where staggering quantities of treasure are supposedly buried. We are talking about tons of gold and silver, along with precious perfumes and scrolls. The instructions are bizarrely specific, yet maddeningly vague. One entry reads, "In the ruin that is in the valley, pass under the entrance leading east 40 cubits. A chest of silver and its vessels weight 17 talents." It names landmarks, pools, and buildings, but the places it references, like the Solomon's Canal or the platform of the Dovecote, have been lost to time. This creates an immediate, tangible tension. Is this a literal treasure map, a desperate record hidden by priests during the brutal First Jewish-Roman War around 70 years after the Common Era, to protect the temple's wealth from Roman legions? If so, it is a historical document of immense importance, a snapshot of hidden wealth from a dying civilization. Or is it something else entirely? Some scholars argue the amounts are fantastical, far beyond the realistic treasury of even the grandest temple. They propose it is a symbolic inventory, a record of a spiritual or mythical treasure, perhaps belonging to a sect that saw material wealth as an allegory for divine wisdom. The copper itself is a clue. In a collection of organic, spiritual texts, why use expensive, durable metal for a list of hiding spots? Copper lasts, parchment decays. The author wanted this list to survive, to be found. But by whom? This question leads to the third possibility, that it is an elaborate work of fiction, a piece of sectarian folklore, or even an ancient hoax. Yet the dry, administrative tone lacks the flourish of a legend. It reads like a clerk's ledger. For decades, treasure hunters and archaeologists have followed its cryptic clues, digging near ancient aqueducts, cisterns, and ruins around the Qumran area and Jerusalem. They have found nothing, not a single talent of silver, not one ingot of gold. This complete absence of physical evidence is what makes the scroll so compelling. It is a promise etched in metal, a guarantee of discovery that has never been fulfilled. The copper scroll stands apart because it appeals to a different kind of hunger. While the other Dead Sea Scrolls feed the soul with questions of faith and origin, the copper scroll speaks to a primal, earthly curiosity. It taps directly into the dream of finding buried treasure. It is a tangible, metallic thread connecting our world to a past of unimaginable wealth, but every time we pull on that thread, it leads not to a chest of gold, but to another layer of the desert sand. Perhaps the greatest treasure it offers is not gold, but the enduring mystery itself, a permanent record of a secret that either never existed or is still waiting patiently for the right person to finally understand the map. The copper scroll's promise of hidden gold remains unfulfilled, but sometimes the earth itself swallows a city whole, turning history into legend. For over 2,000 years, the story of Helike was just that, a cautionary tale told by Greek and Roman authors. They wrote of a wealthy, powerful city-state, a leading member of the Achaean League that was punished by the gods. In the winter of 373 before the Common Era, the story went, the city was obliterated in a single, terrifying night. Witnesses reported seeing immense columns of fire in the sky, and then a colossal earthquake shook the land. As the ground convulsed, the waters of the Corinthian Gulf rushed in, swallowing every building, every temple, every street. Helike vanished beneath the sea, and for centuries it was considered little more than a myth, a poetic metaphor for divine retribution against the prideful. The city dedicated to Poseidon, god of the sea and earthquakes, was said to have been destroyed by that very god when its citizens refused to give their statue of him to a group of visitors. The story was perfect, dramatic, and utterly unverifiable. That is, until the late 20th century, archaeologists armed with ancient texts and modern technology like ground-penetrating radar began to search not in the Gulf itself, but in the coastal plain near the modern village of Eliki. They reasoned that violent geological subsidence could have sunk the city, which was then covered over by centuries of silt from nearby rivers, burying it inland. The breakthrough came in the 1990s. Excavators began to uncover the remnants of a classical Greek city, but it was not lying in orderly ruins. They found shattered pottery, collapsed walls, and a thick layer of seashells and marine debris, all buried under several meters of compacted clay and gravel. This was the smoking gun, evidence that the city had been submerged in salt water. They had found the real Helike, and the ancient stories were proven true in their essence. A catastrophic earthquake and tsunami had indeed destroyed it. Yet, the rediscovery solved one mystery only to reveal others. What exactly caused such a devastating seismic event? The region sits on a complex web of fault lines, and geologists now believe a powerful earthquake caused the soft, saturated ground of the coastal plain to liquefy. Imagine the solid earth turning suddenly into a churning, watery slurry. The city would have simply sunk into this mire, and then a tsunami generated by the quake would have swept over the ruins, scattering debris and depositing that telltale layer of sea life. But the scale was apocalyptic. The city was not just damaged, it was erased from the surface of the earth so completely that its exact location became a subject of folklore. The rediscovery of Helike is a powerful lesson in how history and geology intertwine. A real political and cultural center, a place where people lived and traded and worshipped, was transformed overnight into a ghost story because the natural disaster that destroyed it was so absolute. Its ruins, buried in mud and forgotten, became the physical foundation for a legend of divine punishment. Today, archaeologists continue to piece together its final moments, studying the tilted foundations and the chaotic jumble of artifacts to read the timeline of that horrific night. Helike reminds us that some of our oldest myths are not mere fantasies. They are the echoes of real trauma, stories that persisted for millennia because the truth they were based on was too terrifying to forget. The sea that swallowed Helike was a known terror, but another stretch of ocean has become a modern legend for swallowing the unknown. The Bermuda Triangle, a loosely defined area between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, is less a place and more an idea, a vortex of fear in the Western Atlantic where stories of vanishing ships and planes have coalesced into a global myth. Its infamy was cemented by two 20th-century tragedies that remain deeply unsettling. The first was the loss of the USS Cyclops, a massive 500-foot-long Navy cargo ship with over 300 people aboard. In March 1918, it sailed from Barbados toward Baltimore and vanished without a single distress call. No wreckage was ever found. The Navy called it one of the most baffling mysteries in the annals of the sea. Then, in December 1945, came the event that branded the triangle into popular consciousness, the disappearance of Flight 19. 5 U.S. Navy Avenger torpedo bombers took off on a routine training flight from Fort Lauderdale. Led by an experienced instructor, the flight became hopelessly lost. Radio transmissions captured the pilots' growing confusion and alarm. The flight leader was heard saying, "Everything looks strange, even the ocean. We can't be sure of any direction. All compasses are going haywire." Despite clear weather, the 5 planes with 14 men aboard simply flew into oblivion. A massive search and rescue plane, a Martin Mariner flying boat with 13 crew, was also lost that same evening, adding to the catastrophe. These two incidents, among others, created a perfect storm of mystery. But to understand the triangle, we must separate the chilling facts from the layers of sensationalism that have grown around them. The mundane explanations are often the most powerful. The area is a notorious crossroads for both shipping and air traffic, which statistically increases the chance of accidents. It is also prone to sudden, violent weather. The Gulf Stream flows directly through it, a powerful, warm current that can quickly erase debris and create treacherous, localized storms that form in minutes. Furthermore, the ocean floor here is among the deepest on the planet, with trenches plunging thousands of feet. A plane or ship that goes down in such waters might never leave a trace. Human error, a timeless and tragic factor, is frequently at play. The Flight 19 incident is now widely viewed as a cascade of mistakes. The squadron leader, though experienced, may have become disoriented. Evidence suggests he mistakenly believed he was over the Florida Keys when he was actually far out to sea. When his compasses appeared to fail, he likely rejected correct readings from his junior pilots. Running out of fuel over the open ocean at dusk, the outcome was almost inevitable. The loss of the search plane is attributed to a different, grim reality: the volatile nature of the Martin Mariner aircraft, which was nicknamed the flying gas tank due to its tendency to explode. Yet the human mind craves patterns beyond the mundane. This is where the more enigmatic theories thrive. One compelling scientific idea involves methane hydrates. Vast deposits of this frozen, gas-rich compound exist on the ocean floor. A sudden landslide or temperature change could cause a massive plume of methane bubbles to erupt toward the surface. This would drastically reduce the density of the water, causing a ship to lose buoyancy and sink almost instantly. The bubbling gas could also rise into the air, creating a highly flammable atmosphere that could cause an aircraft's engines to stall or explode. Another theory points to the region's unusual magnetic properties. The Bermuda Triangle is one of the few places on Earth where true north and magnetic north align, a phenomenon called agonic line. For navigators relying on magnetic compasses, this could cause confusion if not properly accounted for, potentially leading to fatal course errors. But do these factors explain everything? Proponents of stranger ideas suggest electromagnetic anomalies could disrupt instruments more profoundly, or even propose ruptures in the fabric of space-time itself. The truth, however, may be the most surprising fact of all. When organizations like the US Coast Guard and the world's largest insurers examine the data, they find the Bermuda Triangle is no more dangerous than any other similarly trafficked part of the ocean. The rate of disappearances, when adjusted for traffic volume and the area's severe weather, is not statistically abnormal. Ships and planes vanish in storms across the globe, from the North Atlantic to the Sea of Japan. The legend persists not because of the evidence, but because of the storytelling. The triangle provides a neat, terrifying container for disparate tragedies, a named villain for the ocean's random cruelty. It transforms accidents into mythology, giving a sense of ominous order to the chaotic and the unexplained. It is a modern folktale, born from real loss and amplified by our deep-seated fear of the vast, indifferent sea and the sky above it. While the Bermuda Triangle thrives on modern legend, a single sheet of parchment in a Turkish museum presents a mystery written in the hand of history itself. In the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul rests a fragment of a world map, drawn on gazelle skin in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis. At first glance, it is a beautiful artifact of the age of exploration, showing the recently discovered coasts of Brazil and West Africa with a detail that is impressive for its time. But look closer and the map begins to whisper impossible things. To the far south, below the Atlantic Ocean, the chart depicts a long, rugged landmass. Piri Reis labeled it, but the labels are worn. Some researchers, with a thrill of disbelief, argue this land is the northern coastline of Antarctica, the continent of ice that would not be officially sighted by human eyes for another 300 years. And more shocking still, this depicted coastline is not buried under miles of glacial ice, as it has been for millions of years. It shows the land as it would appear if the ice were gone, matching modern sub-ice topographic surveys of the continent's bedrock with an eerie precision. The question this forces upon us is staggering. How could a 16th century Ottoman admiral know what lay at the bottom of the world and know it as it was in a distant, ice-free age? The map itself provides clues, and Piri Reis was surprisingly forthright about his sources. In detailed annotations written on the parchment, he states he compiled his work from 20 different source maps, including several he calls very old. Among these were maps from the time of Alexander the Great, Arab charts, and most intriguingly what he calls maps from the Western lands, possibly referring to charts brought back by earlier forgotten explorers. He specifically credits Christopher Columbus, claiming to have used a map drawn by the Genos explorer, a map that has since been lost to history. This admission is the heart of the debate. Skeptics offer a powerful counter-argument. They propose that the controversial southern landmass is not Antarctica at all, but a speculative, distorted version of the southern coast of South America, a common error in early cartography where mapmakers would sometimes double a continent's size or attach fictional lands to fill empty spaces. They argue that the apparent accuracy is a coincidence, a Rorschach test where modern eyes see what they want to see in old, imprecise lines. Furthermore, they point out that the map is missing vast, known sections of the world, including the entire Pacific Ocean and the bulk of the Americas. If Piri Reis had access to such sublime ancient knowledge, why is his map so incomplete? The proponents of the map's mystery counter with a different perspective. They argue that a navigator of Piri Reis's caliber would not casually invent a major coastline. The detail is too specific. They point to the map's use of advanced spherical trigonometry in its construction, and to the chilling congruence between its outlines and the actual subglacial topography of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica, a fit that seems to go far beyond lucky guesswork. This leads to the most profound implication. If the map does show an ice-free Antarctica, it suggests the existence of a prehistoric civilization with seafaring and cartographic capabilities advanced enough to map a continent, a civilization that existed before the last great ice age locked that land away. Are we looking at a surviving fragment of knowledge from a culture like Atlantis, or from an ancient global maritime network whose achievements were wiped clean by cataclysm and time? The Piri Reis map refuses to give a simple answer. It is a palimpsest of history, a layer cake of information from different eras. Perhaps it is a magnificent collage of rumor, guesswork, and genuine discovery. Or perhaps it is a ghost, a paper-thin echo of a world that once was, captured by an admiral who did not fully understand what his old sources were showing him. It dangles the possibility that the history of human exploration is far older and far stranger than our textbooks allow. Deep in the ocean's permanent midnight, a sound was born that should not exist. In the summer of 1997, a network of underwater microphones operated by the United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, listening for submarine movements and seismic activity, picked up something extraordinary. From a remote point in the South Pacific, west of the southern tip of South America, a sound erupted. It was an ultra-low frequency, high-amplitude pulse that rose rapidly in pitch before fading away, lasting just over a minute. The scientists who first heard it gave it a name that captured its strange, organic quality, the bloop. Its power was almost incomprehensible. This sound was detected by multiple sensors over 3,000 miles apart. To be heard across such vast oceanic distances, the source had to be unimaginably loud, far louder than any known animal on Earth, even the songs of the great blue whales. When the audio is sped up for human ears, the bloop does not sound mechanical. It sounds alive, a deep, mournful groan that seems to come from the throat of something colossal. It is a sound that feels ancient and lonely, a voice from the abyss. The immediate and most thrilling speculation was that we had finally heard a creature of legend, something from the depths that defied all our catalogues. The description fit the myth of the giant squid, but the bloop was orders of magnitude louder. Could it be something even larger, a creature unknown to science, a real-life kraken or a prehistoric marine reptile like the plesiosaur, surviving in the crushing darkness of the Hadal Zone? The idea captured the global imagination because it tapped into a primal fear and wonder. The deep ocean is our final frontier, less mapped than the surface of Mars. We know more about the moon's craters than about the trenches scouring our own ocean floor. In that vast, unexplored darkness, the possibility of monstrous life does not feel like science fiction. It feels like a logical conclusion. The mystery of the bloop became a symbol for all the secrets the sea still holds. Yet, science, in its methodical way, began to chip away at the monster theory. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, after years of analysis and comparison with other recorded sounds, eventually presented a more terrestrial, if still powerful, explanation. They concluded the bloop's acoustic signature most closely matched that of icequakes. These are massive events where enormous icebergs crack, calve, or grind against the seabed. The sounds produced by such titanic ice movements are incredibly loud and can carry across ocean basins. The location of the bloop was near a region of major glacial activity off the coast of Antarctica, making an ice-related source geographically plausible. This explanation is scientifically sound and widely accepted. It fits the data, but for many, the icequake theory feels like a letdown, a bureaucratic answer to a poetic question. It fails to fully extinguish the intrigue because of the sound's peculiar character. While icequakes can produce loud, low-frequency rumbles, the specific rising and falling pattern of the bloop, its almost vocal modulation, still stands out as unusual among the library of recorded ice noises. It does not sound like a simple crack or boom, it sounds like a call. This lingering doubt is what keeps the mystery alive in the public mind. The bloop endures because it exists in the space between what we know and what we feel. Scientifically, it is likely the groan of a dying iceberg. Emotionally, it is the song of the unknown. It represents a moment when the deep sea seemed to speak directly to us, and in its brief, powerful utterance, we heard not just a sound but a question. What else is down there in the perpetual cold and pressure that we have not yet heard and may never truly understand? The ocean gave us a one-minute mystery, a deep note that continues to resonate in our curiosity long after the water fell silent. From the deep sea's enigmatic groan, we turn to an object of profound silence, a piece of linen that has stared back at humanity for centuries. The Shroud of Turin is a simple rectangle of cloth, yet it holds one of the most contested and emotionally charged images in history. Woven into its fibers is the faint, full-length imprint of a man who appears to have suffered crucifixion, complete with wounds matching the biblical accounts of the Passion of Jesus Christ. For millions of the faithful, it is not merely an artifact, it is the very burial shroud of their Savior, a divine photograph of the moment of resurrection. For skeptics, it is the ultimate medieval forgery, a clever deception that has fooled generations. The truth, as always, lies tangled in a web of faith, science, and mystery. The shroud first appears clearly in the historical record in the 1350s, when a French knight displayed it in a small church. Its journey before that is shrouded in legend, with stories linking it to the Knights Templar or tracing it back from Constantinople to the Holy Land. But the modern debate ignited in 1898, when a lawyer named Secondo Pia took the first photograph of the cloth. Staring at his own photographic negative plate in the darkroom, he was stunned. The faint, puzzling image on the cloth itself transformed in the negative into a strikingly clear, positive portrait of a serene, wounded man. This revealed the shroud's first great mystery. The image itself is a perfect natural negative, a quality unknown in any art from the ancient or medieval world. How could a forger, centuries before the invention of photography, create an image that only makes perfect sense as a photographic negative? The scientific scrutiny intensified throughout the 20th century. Teams of researchers called the Shroud of Turin Research Project were granted direct access in 1978. Their findings added layers of complexity. They confirmed the presence of what appears to be human blood, type AB, on the cloth. They found minute traces of pollen from plants native to the Jerusalem area. Most baffling of all, they determined that the image is not painted. There is no pigment, no brush strokes, no substance applied to the linen surface. The coloration resides only on the very topmost fibers, as if the image was produced by a brief, intense burst of radiation that caused a molecular change in the cloth, a sort of superficial scorching. Furthermore, the intensity of the image encodes three-dimensional information about the body it covered. When fed into a device called a VP8 image analyzer, developed for NASA to map planetary terrain, the shroud's image produced a detailed, sculptural relief of a human form. A painting would have flattened such details. Then, in 1988, came the bombshell that seemed to settle the debate. With the Church's permission, 3 independent laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Tucson were given small samples from a corner of the shroud for radiocarbon dating. All 3 returned remarkably consistent results, dating the linen to between 1260 and 1390. The medieval period. For many, this was conclusive proof of a forgery, a brilliant hoax created in the very era when fake relics were a lucrative business. Case closed, but the story refused to end. Proponents of the shroud's authenticity immediately challenged the carbon dating. They argued the sample taken was from a later, expertly rewoven section used to repair the cloth after a fire in the 1530s, which nearly destroyed it. They pointed to chemical studies suggesting the fire and the subsequent dousing with water could have contaminated the linen with newer carbon, skewing the results. They highlighted the pollen evidence and the inexplicable image formation as facts the carbon dating could not erase. The debate descended into a technical stalemate, a war of scientific interpretations where each side marshals its own data. So what are we left with? If it is a medieval forgery, we must accept that an unknown genius working over 600 years ago possessed knowledge of human anatomy, photographic negative imaging, and radiation-like effects that would not be understood for centuries. This forger would have had to create an image without any known medium, one that withstands microscopic and spectral analysis. It is a staggering proposition. If the shroud is authentic, then we are confronted with a physical object that seems to testify to a moment of transcendent physical transformation, an event that left its shadow on a piece of cloth. The third possibility, often overlooked, is that it could be a genuine artifact of a profound but natural historical event, a real crucifixion from the 1st century, with the image formed by some unknown chemical process involving burial spices and body vapors that science has yet to replicate. The Shroud of Turin, more than any other artifact, exists at the crossroads of belief and evidence. It asks us not just to examine linen fibers, but to examine what we accept as proof. It is a mirror reflecting our own assumptions about history, science, and the divine. Whether one sees the face of God or the hand of a cunning artist, the shroud's power is undeniable. It has endured fires, wars, and centuries of doubt not because it provides answers, but because it holds 2 contradictory truths in a single, fragile piece of cloth, forever inviting us to look closer and to wonder. Gold has a way of turning landscape into legend, and nowhere is that alchemy more potent than in the sun-baked canyons of Arizona's Superstition Mountains. Here, the air shimmers with heat and a story of impossible wealth, a story that has drawn thousands into its treacherous folds, searching for what they call the Lost Dutchman's gold mine. The name itself is a misdirection, born from the American frontier's habit of calling any German-speaking immigrant a Dutchman. In this case, the man was Jacob Waltz, a prospector who arrived in the 1860s. For decades, he lived a quiet, modest life around Phoenix, but on his deathbed in 1891, the old man began to whisper, He spoke of a mine so rich you could pry gold directly from the walls with a knife. He described a hidden canyon accessible only through a narrow, shadowed passage, guarded by a peculiar rock formation that looked like a needle's eye. He claimed to have taken over $200,000 in raw gold from this one place, a fortune that would be worth millions today. And then, with his final breath, he gave directions that were poetic, precise, and utterly useless. He spoke of a landmark visible only when the shadow of a certain peak touched a specific rock at a particular hour. He left behind a few crude maps or samples of stunning purity, and a mystery that would become an American obsession. The search began almost immediately and has never truly stopped. Treasure hunters, armed with Waltz's dying clues and their own hand-drawn maps, have scoured every arroyo and cliff face of the superstitions. They have found death more often than gold. The mountains are a beautiful death trap, a maze of sheer drops, hidden ravines, and temperatures that can kill a man in hours. Dozens have vanished within them, their bones sometimes discovered years later, bleached white by the desert sun. Others have died in violent confrontations, guarding their secret dig sites or fighting over a promising ledge. The superstitions seem to enforce their own curse, as if the land itself resists giving up this secret. This trail of tragedy only deepens the legend, transforming the mine from a simple geological feature into something almost sentient, a malevolent treasure that consumes those who seek it. So what are people actually looking for? Is there a real, massive gold vein waiting to be found? Geologists point out that the Superstition Mountains are volcanic in origin, and while there are small, scattered deposits of gold, the geology is not typical for the kind of colossal, free milling lode that Waltz described. This leads to a compelling theory. The Lost Dutchman's mine is not one place but many. Jacob Waltz, a skilled and secretive prospector, may have simply been exceptionally good at finding the small, rich pockets that do exist. Over his lifetime, he could have worked numerous tiny, hidden digs, accumulating his hoard piece by piece. On his deathbed, perhaps conflating them all or spinning a tale to reward the kind woman caring for him, he consolidated these separate sites into the legend of one grand, singular bonanza. His clues, then, are not directions to a single spot, but fragmented memories of many different locations, scrambled together into an unsolvable riddle. Other researchers believe the legend is older than Waltz, rooted in the region's Spanish colonial past. Stories persist of a fabulously rich mine worked by the Peralta family from Mexico in the 1840s, only to have their mining party massacred by Apaches. Could Waltz have stumbled upon the abandoned cache of the Peralta mine, a real location that was later lost? Some of the maps associated with the Dutchman do show symbols and markers that resemble Spanish mining notations, suggesting a layering of legends where one lost treasure story grafted itself onto another. Yet, after more than a century of modern searches with helicopters, metal detectors, and satellite imagery, no major mine has been found. This profound absence forces a final, haunting question. Is the true treasure the gold, or is it the search itself? The Lost Dutchman's mine functions as a perfect desert mirage. It is always just over the next ridge, in the next canyon, on the next faded map. It promises a resolution that never comes, and in doing so, it ensures its own immortality. It is not a place on a map, but a story we tell about greed, hope, and the dangerous allure of a secret. Every prospector who walks into those mountains is walking into a narrative, chasing the ghost of Jacob Waltz and the glittering dream he left behind. A dream that the dry Arizona wind seems to whisper is just one more climb away. Gold is a tangible obsession, but some minds are consumed by a more abstract treasure, the need to be known without ever being seen. In the cool, foggy autumn of 1969, the city of San Francisco received a letter that was not just a threat, but a declaration of war against understanding itself. It arrived at the offices of 3 different newspapers, each containing a third of a 408-character cipher. With it was a chilling note from a man who called himself the Zodiac, demanding it be printed on the front page or he would, in his words, go on a kill rampage on Friday night. This was not the desperate scrawl of a typical criminal. This was a calculated performance, a gauntlet thrown down to the public, the press, and the police. The cipher was cracked within a week by a schoolteacher and his wife, revealing a message boasting of the thrill of killing and a claim of collecting slaves for the afterlife. But the victory was hollow. The decoded text gave no name, no address, no concrete clue to his identity. It only confirmed the terrifying intellect and grandiosity of the predator now hunting in the Bay Area. This was the Zodiac's true weapon, not the gun or knife he used on his victims, but the code. He weaponized mystery. The case that unfolded was a nightmare of modern anonymity. Over the next few years, the Zodiac claimed responsibility for at least 5 murders, though he boasted of many more. He sent a stream of letters to the newspapers, each meticulously crafted to terrorize and taunt. He included pieces of blood-stained clothing from his victims as proof. He designed a cryptic crosshair symbol as his signature, and he sent more ciphers. One, a 340-character cryptogram mailed in November of that same year, became the holy grail of the case. For over 50 years, it defied every attempt at decryption. Amateur and professional cryptanalysts, FBI codebreakers, and generations of obsessed armchair detectives poured over its grid of symbols. It was a wall of utter silence. The Zodiac had promised this cipher contained his name. For half a century, that promise hung in the air, a locked door behind which the killer's identity might finally be waiting. Then, in December 2020, a team of private citizens announced a breakthrough. Using modern computing power and a relentless collaborative effort, they believed they had cracked the 340 cipher. The decrypted message was another brutal shock, not for what it revealed, but for what it did not. It contained no name. Instead, it was a rambling, paranoid, and oddly childish rant. "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me." It read in part, "I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner." The content was chillingly nihilistic, but it was also a profound anticlimax. The killer had lied. The cipher that was supposed to be his ultimate reveal was just another layer of the game, another twist of the knife in the public's desire for closure. It proved the Zodiac's primary goal was not to be caught, but to control the narrative, to remain a ghost in the machine of the investigation, forever one step ahead in a puzzle of his own design. This leads to the central, maddening question that has outlived the crimes themselves. Who was he? The suspect list is long and shadowy. The most famous is Arthur Lee Allen, a school teacher whose name was brought to police by a friend early in the investigation. Allen bore striking similarities to composite sketches, owned a watch inscribed with the Zodiac's crosshair symbol, and was cited by witnesses near attack sites. He was interrogated repeatedly but never charged, and he died in 1992. Others point to a man named Ross Sullivan, a mentally unstable former library clerk who resembled sketches and had a known fascination with codes. There is even a theory, fueled by inconsistencies in handwriting and attack methods, that the Zodiac was not one man, but 2 or even 3 individuals, a collaborative nightmare where one person committed the murders and another, perhaps more intellectually inclined, crafted the letters and ciphers to amplify the fear. This idea of multiple Zodiacs addresses the strange disconnect between the sometimes clumsy, opportunistic attacks and the sophisticated, controlled persona of the letters. The Zodiac case represents a uniquely modern historical mystery. It is not a vanished civilization or a lost artifact, but a psychological black hole that opened in the age of mass media. The killer understood the power of the press and used it as his megaphone. He created his own mythology in real time, crafting a brand of terror that was part serial killer, part puzzle master, part performance artist. His origins are not lost to the erosion of centuries. They are deliberately obscured by layers of cipher, boast, and lie, left in manila envelopes on reporters' desks. We have his handwriting, we have his voice from a terrifying phone call to police, we have his symbols, and yet he remains a silhouette. The codes were not the key to finding him, they were the maze he built to ensure he was never found. In the end, the Zodiac's greatest cipher was not the 340 cryptogram. It was his own identity, a message he encoded in violence and mailed to history, knowing we would never stop trying and failing to solve it. The psychological pressure cooker of 16th century Strasbourg was not built overnight. To understand why a woman might dance herself to death and why hundreds would follow, you must feel the weight of the world pressing down on their shoulders. The year 1518 was the tail end of a devastating period. Crop failures had become a grim norm, leading to severe and repeated famines. The poor, who made up the vast majority of the population, were surviving on meager, often rotten food. Malnutrition was rampant, weakening bodies and fraying nerves. At the same time, the church held an iron grip on the collective conscience. This was an era of profound religious guilt, where every misfortune, from a sick child to a failed harvest, could be interpreted as divine punishment for sin. The fear of hell was not an abstract concept, it was a daily, visceral terror. People believed God was watching, and he was frequently displeased. In this atmosphere, the body itself could become a canvas for expressing unbearable spiritual and social anguish. A strange physical compulsion, like dancing, might have been the only language left to scream when words failed. It was a somatic cry for help from a society on the brink. This is where the concept of mass psychogenic illness becomes so compelling. It is not fake or imagined, the suffering is utterly real. The mind, under intolerable stress, manufactures genuine physical symptoms that spread through a community like a psychic contagion. One person's breakdown becomes a template, a permissible outlet for everyone else's shared despair. In Strasbourg, dancing was that template. It was a known form of religious ecstasy and penitence associated with Saint Vitus, who was paradoxically both the patron saint of dancers and the saint invoked to cure a dancing mania. So the act itself existed in the cultural vocabulary, a twisted form of worship born from terror. We see echoes of this phenomenon in modern times, stripped of its medieval religious context but powered by the same engine of stress and suggestion. One of the most documented cases is the Tunguska laughter epidemic of 1962. It began innocuously at a girls' boarding school in what is now Tanzania. 3 students started laughing and could not stop. The laughter, often described as painful and uncontrollable, spread rapidly through the school, affecting dozens, then hundreds of girls. It lasted for months, forcing the school to temporarily close. Medical investigators found no toxic cause, no virus or environmental poison. The trigger appeared to be acute anxiety, the intense pressure of school life and exams, combined with the powerful suggestion of seeing peers succumb. The laughter was not joyful, it was a physical seizure of anxiety, a bodily revolt against psychological strain. Just like the dancers of Strasbourg, these girls were expressing a collective distress through their bodies because their minds had no other way to process it. The dancing plague, therefore, transcends its bizarre specifics. It becomes a dark mirror held up to any society under extreme duress. It shows us that when hope shrinks and fear expands, the human psyche can short-circuit in spectacular collective ways. The dancers were not possessed by demons or cursed by a saint. They were likely crushed by the world they lived in. Their bodies simply became the stage where a silent, societal scream was finally performed. A tragic ballet of famine, faith, and fear that reminds us just how thin the line can be between a breaking mind and a body that refuses to obey. The scar on the Siberian forest became a laboratory for the 20th century. Leonid Kulik's first expedition in 1927 was a journey into a landscape of ghosts. He found the trees, millions of them, laid out like fallen soldiers in a perfect radial pattern, all pointing away from a central point of devastation. But at that epicenter, he found no crater, no smoking gun, only standing, scorched trunks stripped of their branches, a forest of telegraph poles. This absence defined the mystery for the next 100 years. Subsequent expeditions, armed with better tools, mapped the blast zone with meticulous care. They calculated the energy released, a staggering 10 to 15 megatons, and traced the shockwave through the atmosphere. They studied the soil, finding microscopic spheres of silicate and magnetite, tiny beads of melted rock and metal that could only have been forged in the intense heat of an extraterrestrial object vaporizing. Tree rings from that year showed a period of stunted growth, followed by a surge, evidence of a sudden trauma, and then the clearing of the forest canopy, allowing in new light. All the evidence pointed to one thing: a massive explosion in the sky. The leading theory, now widely accepted, is that a relatively small asteroid, perhaps only 100 to 200 feet across, entered Earth's atmosphere at a shallow angle and a speed of tens of thousands of miles per hour. The pressure and heat of its descent caused it to explode in a colossal airburst, roughly 3 to 6 miles above the ground. This turned the solid body into a fireball of superheated gas and plasma, which then hammered the forest below with a blast wave and thermal radiation. It was not an impact but a detonation in mid-air. This explains the radial tree fall and the utter lack of a crater, yet a nagging question remains. If it was a stony asteroid, where are the fragments? Expeditions have scoured the area, even drilling into peat bogs where heavier material would sink, hoping to find a buried meteorite. They have found tiny particles, but nothing substantial. This absence fuels the enduring mystery and the more exotic theories. Could it have been a fragile comet made mostly of ice and dust which would have vaporized completely? Or does the lack of debris point to something even stranger, like the hypothetical mirror matter proposed by some physicists? The most important legacy of Tunguska, however, is not in the past but in the future. It was a wake-up call written in fire across the sky. For the first time, humanity understood that a random object from space could unleash the energy of 1,000 Hiroshimas without warning. Today, we know that near-Earth objects of similar size pass by our planet with unsettling regularity. A Tunguska-scale event is statistically likely to occur once every few hundred years. The next one could happen over a populated city. This is why Tunguska transformed from a historical curiosity into the founding event of planetary defense. It spurred the creation of programs like NAS, a Planetary Defense Coordination Office, which tirelessly catalogs and tracks potentially hazardous asteroids. It is the reason scientists are developing missions to test deflecting an asteroid, like the DART mission, which successfully nudged a small moonlet in 2022. The silent forest in Siberia is a monument to our vulnerability. It reminds us that the sky is not empty and that our survival on this pale blue dot depends not just on looking inward at our own history, but outward with vigilance into the deep and unpredictable dark. That single artifact pulled from a shipwreck did more than just rewrite a chapter of history. It forced us to reconsider the entire library. The Antikythera Mechanism's legacy is a haunting one, a ghost of a technological path not taken. Its very existence poses a profound and unsettling question. How could knowledge this sophisticated, this beautifully engineered, simply vanish from the human record for over 1,500 years? The answer is a lesson in the fragility of civilization itself. The fall of the classical world was not a single event, but a slow unraveling of networks. The great libraries like Alexandria burned. The trade routes that carried ideas fractured. The meticulous mathematical arts of Greek astronomy and engineering were no longer copied, taught, or valued in the same way. Practical knowledge for building aqueducts and catapults survived. but the exquisite philosophy of modeling the cosmos with gears, of creating a portable, mechanical universe, was lost. It was not a technology suppressed, but a tradition forgotten, a delicate flame that flickered out in the winds of war, migration, and shifting priorities. For centuries, the intricate dance of the planets was explained by celestial spheres and divine will, not by a hand crank and a differential gear. The mechanism became a silent prophet of a road not traveled, a whisper of a potential scientific revolution that lay dormant at the bottom of the sea. To hear that whisper, modern science had to lend its voice. For decades, the corroded lump of bronze resisted understanding. Then, in the early 21st century, a team of researchers from the Antikythera Mechanism research project used a revolutionary tool, three-dimensional X-ray tomography. Think of it as a super-powered CT scan, the kind used in hospitals but for history. This technology allowed them to peer inside the calcified blocks without damaging them, to map the gear trains in 3 dimensions, and most astonishingly, to read hidden inscriptions that had been invisible for 2 millennia. The machine began to speak. These inscriptions were not just labels, they were a user manual etched in bronze. They confirmed the mechanism's purpose as an astronomical calculator, but they also revealed stunning new functions. One entire dial was dedicated to tracking the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games, a major pan-Hellenic festival that unified the Greek world. This was not just a scientist's tool, it was a cultural and civic device connecting the heavens to human ritual. Other inscriptions detailed the motions of the planets known to the Greeks: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, showing how the mechanism modeled their irregular retrograde paths across the sky. Armed with this new data, researchers like Michael Wright, a former curator at London's Science Museum, embarked on a mission to bring the machine back to life. Wright spent decades building physical reconstructions, painstakingly cutting brass gears by hand to test theories of its operation. His work, and that of the international research team, culminated in stunningly accurate digital and physical models. Watching a modern reconstruction in motion is a revelation. As you turn the input crank, a symphony of interlocking bronze gears whirs to life. Pointers sweep across dials, showing the sun's position in the zodiac, the phase of the moon, and the dates of upcoming eclipses. A tiny, rotating ball, painted half silver and half black, spins to display the lunar cycle. Another dial counts down the years to the next Olympic Games. The complexity is breathtaking, a mechanical computer that could predict celestial events decades into the future. These reconstructions prove it was not a theoretical toy, it was a precise working instrument. The true weight of the Antikythera mechanism lies in the void it reveals. It was not a one-off miracle. The engineering is too refined, the design too elegant. It suggests a tradition, a school of craftsmanship that has been completely erased. How many other devices like it were made and then lost to time, fire, or the slow decay of metal and memory? This single artifact shatters our timeline of progress. It tells us that the seeds of our own technological age, the very concept of a computer, were planted far earlier than we ever dared to imagine. It stands as a permanent monument to a terrifying truth that human knowledge is not a steady, ascending line. It is a fragile flame, constantly at risk of being blown out, leaving only scattered, incomprehensible fragments behind for a future age to puzzle over, wondering what we knew and how we could have possibly forgotten. 25 doors remain firmly locked, their keys lost to time. We have stood before each one, from the silent fort at Roanoke to the humming static of the wow signal, from the dancing streets of Strasbourg to the frozen gears of an ancient computer. Each mystery, in its own way, is a monument to the limits of our understanding. They are not failures of history, but its most compelling features the gaps in the narrative where our curiosity ignites. These unsolved events do more than puzzle us, they redefine what history is. It is not merely a record of what we know, but a map of what we have yet to discover. Every vanished army, every indecipherable manuscript, every inexplicable sound from the deep sea challenges the comforting idea that the past is settled. It is alive with questions. These stories prove that our ancestors were just as complex, just as ingenious, and sometimes just as terrified as we are today. Their fears, their triumphs, and their baffling experiences are etched not only in what they left behind, but in what they took with them. So the next time you hear a strange story from the past, resist the urge to dismiss it as mere legend. Look closer. Within that mystery might be a forgotten truth, a lost technology, or a human experience so profound it defies our modern categories. The investigation is never over. New evidence emerges, fresh perspectives are applied, and sometimes a determined mind with a new tool can finally turn a stubborn lock. Which of these 25 enigmas lingers in your thoughts? Does the silent fate of the Mary Celeste haunt you? Or does the mathematical beauty of the Antikythera Mechanism fill you with awe for a lost world? Share your pick in the comments below. The conversation about the unexplained is always better with more voices. If you enjoyed this journey through history's greatest puzzles, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon. There are countless more corners of our strange and wonderful world left to explore. Until next time, keep looking, keep wondering, and never stop